Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning in person and on the live stage. I'm Anna Palmer. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News. I am thrilled to be here for this pop-up conversation with Senator Mark Warner, the Democrat from Virginia. We're going to be focusing on national security, a bit of the news of the day, no shortage of that, and what's happening in Congress right now. Andrew Desiderio, our senior congressional reporter, is going to join me on stage to co-moderate that conversation. A big thank you to RTX for partnering with us to make this conversation possible. Afterward, I'm going to be joined by Henry Brooks, who is president of Power and Controls at Collins Aerospace. As always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media at Punchbowl News. And we encourage you to share this conversation there. And with that, let's welcome the Senator and Andrew to the stage. Sir.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, we have plenty to get to. We appreciate your coming this morning on a busy, busy time on Capitol Hill. Andrew, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So, Senator Warner, over the weekend, as you know, Congress passed a bill to fund the government for 45 days. It did not include any aid for Ukraine in it. I know you were outspoken about that on Saturday, but the reasoning among you and your colleagues was that this outcome was much better than a government shutdown, especially for someone like you who represents so many federal workers in the state of Virginia. Right now, there are accelerated conversations on Capitol Hill about trying to get a larger scale Ukraine package through. What are your expectations for that, and how confident are you that that can actually get done here over the next couple months?
Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Anna. Saturday was about as bizarre a day as I've had. You know, I said, like, kind of down the rabbit hole, up is down and down is up was kind of the description. And you know, what was, if you step back for a moment and look, you know, 3 days earlier, over 75% of the House, 330 votes, had voted to basically keep in Ukraine aid. At least on public. On the Senate, there were only 6 senators. Now, that might have gone up, but only 6 had signed a bill. So the notion that 75 to 80% of both bodies wanted Ukraine aid so badly, or wanted it, and that the opponents were so opposed that they were willing to actually even go above the Democrats' requests for spending and more than double the disaster aid was kind of a telling comment, number one. There was a problem. I think the administration, and I say this as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and I still don't have 100% clarity of the $113 billion that we've already appropriated, $62 billion roughly on the defense side, how much of that was left? There was a little bit of hide the ball. There was a journal story this morning of about $5 billion. There was one account, they said there was roughly 1.9. There's still, I think, lack of clarity. And that made the case harder for how immediate the needs were. I do believe the 45 days is going to be shaky, and it was a little weird coming on Sunday, traveling around Virginia and getting, you know, attaboys. Well, somehow an attaboy for keeping the government open shows maybe the baseline has fallen a little bit too much. But on Ukraine, it's crazy. If you're thinking from a national security standpoint, that we would take this moment and potentially walk away. 3 things. One, and there's a great ad out that you probably have seen, you know, kind of Republicans for Ukraine, that makes clear the point that the Ukrainian military has done what we in NATO, America and NATO, were planning to do for 60 years. They have basically eliminated 50% of Russia's military capacity. In a year and a half, they've taken Russia, the second most powerful military in the world, and maybe made it now the second most powerful military in Ukraine, and eliminate 50% of their capacity without the cost of a single American life or NATO life. Secondly, in a moment when we have to reaffirm our alliances and we see an expanded NATO, to somehow send a signal that we're not going to be there, particularly in light of the Slovakian elections on Saturday and the Polish elections coming up, makes no sense at all. And then the part that I scratch my head, because I hear more House guys than Senate guys saying, well, we don't really care about Putin in Ukraine, But we're terrified about President Xi in China, and to not understand the connection that if Putin is successful in Ukraine, that is a total green light for Xi in China. If you don't get that, you flunk geopolitics 101. So I think it is absolutely critical that we step up. I still, as chair of the Intelligence Committee, know that China is our ultimate long-term potential adversary, and particularly in terms of technology competition and national security in 2023 is more than tanks and guns. It is AI and 5G and synthetic biology and quantum computing, but it also is traditional military, and I think we will find the dollars. I think there was enormous bipartisan interest in getting that done. And the big question will become, and I know you're quickly looking, this is Punch Bowl, you're quickly looking at the 47 other questions. You know, the question will be, is it the whole full year slug, or is it going to be in pieces? Many of the Republicans feel like we ought to go for the full 1 year slug in the next battle.
I want to talk about that and kind of the Republican argument we've heard from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is that the majority of the money is being spent right here in the U.S., actually. It's not just going over as foreign aid. The argument here is that we're not just cutting checks to Ukraine and saying, here, have it, figure it out, but that actually this can help the American industrial base. Can you talk a little bit about that? And do you think that that resonates with your fellow either Democrats or Republicans?
Listen, Leader McConnell's been as strong as a defender of aid for the Ukraine as any of us. And I want to, give him appropriate credit for that. And he's actually right. Of the 62 billion plus that are on the security side, the vast majority of it is going to American companies for and increasing our production lines. I mean, some of these areas like the old artillery shells and other things, 155 millimeter shells, we needed to increase capacity, domestic capacity. I don't have the number, but the overwhelming majority of this is going to, frankly, the American defense industry. And the administration has been good about making sure that these were all armaments out of our reserves, not out of our current stock. Now, we were bleeding into a little bit of that by category. But I think Senator McConnell's statement is right. I do think the one thing we do need more is clarity. And now, obviously, some of the things that were in this package fall on my side of the budget, on the Intel side, so can't be spelled out. But I think making clearer accounting will be helpful as we go into this next battle.
I want to shift gears real quick to innovation at the Department of Defense. Can you talk about how the DOD can use commercial innovation to make sure that they have the most up-to-date technology and perhaps just as importantly, help lower the cost for taxpayers?
Well, great question, Andrew. And let me talk first two examples. One example is on overhead. And I think about this as well from the Intel side as well as the DOD side. I thought when I first got on the Intelligence Committee that people at the NRO may have had a picture of me they threw darts at because I kept trying to say, on satellites, let's go commercial. Let's not simply have the large primes build these, as Angus King once described, big flat floating cows in the sky, like nobody had ever seen a James Bond movie, because you always realize in the James Bond movie they shoot down these big massive satellites, and we'd not thought that through. And we've made that to the point where we've got now SpaceX. We need some competitors there as well. I think on the kind of on the military traditional DoD side, there's still a lot of room for improvement. I remember early on in this job, and haven't been a business guy and hadn't been a governor, that I'm going to fix defense procurement. And somebody came in with like 12 volumes of things, and I relatively quickly gave up. One of the things where I'm spending time and is how we put together, and again, I don't want to nerd out here, all the funders on the private sector side in the capital stack, from early stage to middle stage, because we still have the classic valley of death, a great new innovative company trying to break into DOD. How do you become a project of record? How do you get through that dip? One of the things that is fundamentally changed, I say this as a former venture guy, is that there used to be a very small universe of funders. But as we think about, again, national security, not just being tanks, guns, ships, and planes, but being AI, quantum, sensors, overhead. Frankly, I'm going deep on synthetic biology and small modular nukes at this point in terms of areas we have to compete with China. It's a much broader portfolio, and there are a lot more companies who are potentially funders. They can help those innovative companies get through. We still need a process, and we're looking at, could each security sector, each part of the IC pick 4 or 5, designated entities each year. It's still opportunity great, challenge of how you get through the bureaucracy is still great as well.
Well, the NDA brings that up, right? Isn't there a provision for a study that would kind of examine that DOD acquisition model? What do you hope to get out of it? Is it, you said like changing this kind of process is arduous and difficult, but do you think that can be helpful?
We've got to, listen, I'm very interested in this because a lot of those innovative companies are in Northern Virginia and others are moving their headquarters to Northern Virginia. I think it's not been lack of innovation. It's been lack of having a procurement process that moves away from the traditional primes and the willingness, frankly, of the department to take some risks. And I keep thinking, well, can we use the IC, the intel community, as the point of the spear, because we roughly are 1/10 of the balance of the DOD budget, to help push that innovation. And this study is a good one. I was more interested in also seeing if we could actually have the service secretaries identify champions. But for all the identification through the procurement process, if we don't have a capital stack that can have the different funding sources, and it is much more robust than it was a few years ago. We have moved light years from where we were, 5 years ago when Google said, well, maybe we don't want to work with the DOD. I quickly reminded the Google leadership they didn't have any problem working with the CCP in China on the same kind of AI-related activities. Everybody across the traditional tech community, though, is anxious to be in this. So that's all a good sign.
So we want to talk about AI in China, but before we do, I want to just also kind of...
We're going to do all this in 25 minutes?
We're going to do all of it. We're moving fast here, folks. And I promise you, I'm going to help be the guide.
I got 7-point plans on all of these.
I want to talk, though, about the technology and sustainability a little bit. There's been a lot of talk around the Defense Department updating that technology. Maybe commercial innovation can be helpful there, like the hybrid cars for the Air Force. How important do you think this is in terms of finding sustainable technology, the government kind of maybe incentivizing DOD to move in that direction?
Well, I know our next speaker is going to speak to that, and I think they've done a very good job, but it's absolutely critical. And, it's like I was down in Norfolk yesterday with our ship repair guys who were aghast at the potential government shutdown and the continuing absurdity of CRs, which also screw up your budget in terms of if you finished repairing a ship last year and you're in a CR, you can't start your new business. You guys and the Hampton Roads community may be the only group of Americans that understand what a CR is, but so I think there are ways we can push and DOD can be helpful. And part of the reasons it's so essential, we literally spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year, every year in Virginia, to raise the dock level where our ships dock because of sea level rise. So the colleagues I have who say, this doesn't, we want to protect national security, but we can ignore climate change or ignore sea level rise. I wish they'd talk to the Navy. So how do we do this on a sustainability basis? I'm actually, and I've been talking a lot with DOD on this, I'm a huge advocate for small modular nukes, SMRs. China and Russia are out trying to promote these dramatically. And one of the reasons why we have 3 or 4 in process in this country, DOD is looking strongly at this because what I'm seeing as we need to move towards sustainability, we are seeing some of the areas that we thought might be kind of, and I never thought there'd be one size fits all, but we've seen the offshore wind industry go through a dramatic decline. We've still got our project going off the coast of Virginia, but the administration has acknowledged they're not going to get 30 megawatts. Half of the projects off the East Coast have fallen into we can't make it with the current financing. Or if you look at solar, I've got a number of communities in Virginia where agricultural communities and others are pushing back about these massive solar fields. SMRs, which I think are both safe and clean. And one of the things I always thought was hypocritical of some folks in the environmental community is, we don't want to do nuclear, but they never question the concerns about what about our sailors being on aircraft carriers and submarines that have got nukes. So I think this is an area where I hope DOD and we from the IC can push this, because again, it is also a competition with China and Russia.
You briefly touched on this, but artificial intelligence, big topic right now on Capitol Hill, especially in the Senate. Majority Leader Schumer is leading a push on this, trying to get legislation sometime next year. You guys recently held a closed-door forum with tech executives and industry stakeholders. We just rolled out a product today at Punchbowl News called The Future of Cybersecurity.
Check that out at punchbowl.news.
Yes, where we talk
And
about...
since you're talking to the chair of the Cyber Caucus as well as the chair of the Intel community.
Exactly, yes. You are actually quoted in our first edition this morning as saying that you worry that artificial intelligence could make 2016 look like child's play. You were talking in terms of malign foreign interference in our elections. Can you talk about what you mean by that, and what the prospects you think are for Congress to actually get something done on this next year?
Do I get a full 2 minutes on this one, or are you trying to do it?
Take your time.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think I've spent as much time on artificial intelligence as any member of the Senate before, and I give credit for Leader Schumer, what he's trying to bring everybody along. I've had a dozen plus sessions, all bipartisan, and bringing in kind of the who's who as well. Secondly, I've never been involved in a subject where the more time I spend on it doesn't equate to the smarter I think I'm getting. Everything has been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And if you think about just, and this has been confirmed by OSTP, if you just think about the basic economics, I've never seen something where the premises is radically changed. If we go way, way back in time to last November, with Sam Altman and Alex Wang and all the other folks coming in, the operating premise, I think, was the winner in AI will be who has the most scale, who has the most data, who has the most compute, GPUs, who can test that data the most, who's got the most money. So from a geopolitical standpoint, China, obviously, huge amounts of data, huge amounts of compute, all the right things. We thought, OpenAI/Microsoft, Anthropic/Google or /Google now Amazon, they would dominate the field on large language models. Starting in March, that premise changed as Meta released Llama into the wild, and suddenly you had an LLM coming out of UAE for pennies on the dollar. And the whole premise that you had to build everything around a large language model and then attach specific industry applications fundamentally changed. And the economics, I don't think there's been near enough, and your Punchbowl ought to do something about how the economics has changed, number one. Number two, the whole question of how you build security, whether you build it in, and I do think these guys have been moving so quickly on their arms race that they may not be building enough security in. So that brings us to where do you go on legislation. I am very much skeptical, having seen Congress's 0 for 100 record on doing anything on social media. We've been blown away on everything, and I remember when I was so naive last March and put this bipartisan idea together. Well, we ought to have a framework on how we deal with foreign technology that could be threatening. TikTok was simply one example, but coming on the basis of Huawei and Kaspersky. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be so easy. We merrily roll along until Huawei/ByteDance drop $100 million, sponsoring organizations like yours and others, and it's hard to push back. And for those of you who say, I told you so, well, look at the recent story where TikTok employees are leaving like mad because ByteDance is further putting individuals in. There's still security risk. I am going to answer your question. What does this look like on legislation? I think those who are optimistic think we can have a holistic legislation. Probably too much, too quick, although there is huge bipartisan concern that we don't want to repeat what we did with social media and say, you guys figure it out and we'll put in guardrails later. So, where would I start? Where could AI have the most dramatic effect tomorrow in terms of exponentially greater disruption and greater undermining of institutions? I would argue the two domains that are most vulnerable at this moment, one, confidence in our elections, and 2016 would be child's play compared to what 2024, both in terms of amount of not just deep fakes, but the time and scale with which you can create these tools is exponentially higher. But as we've seen, a democracy alone legislative approach probably won't have enough juice to get through. What is the other area that you could have as much, if not more dramatic disruption? Well, that's confidence in our public markets. And there's been one example where there was a deep fake of a fake burning of the Pentagon. It had a little bit of market disruption, but if I had a whole 7 minutes, if I could take you through all the different AI tools that could undermine confidence in an individual stock. So my sense from a political sausage making, if we could combine the capitalists with the small d Democrats, because those are the two institutions that could be most undermined, and you could say, well, there's always been misinformation and disinformation tools out there. This happens at a scale and a speed which we could never predict. Last point I'll make on this, and I think there is great interest. I got a lot of members on both sides saying, hey, all right, Warner, let's think about this. And there are analogies, and this is not a perfect one, not a perfect one, not a perfect one. But, you know, we've had weapons of war forever. And you shoot somebody with a gun and that's, you know, dead. But we've decided as a society that things like chemical weapons and nuclear weapons would carry a higher penalty or have a stricter prohibition. Not perfect analogy, but the notion that AI around confidence in public elections and public markets, the tools could be so much more powerful than traditional disruption. There may be either higher penalty, lower threshold of proof. You know, it's still a little bit how do you prohibit on the front end. But I think directionally, this is where I think we could kind of put together the notional idea and guardrails, even in a Congress that's, you know, challenged. Recognizing, of course, that we're not doing this in a vacuum. The EU's got one set of rules, UK's got another. China, frankly, in terms of their domestic application, I'm under no illusion that the rules would apply in terms of how they use AI on an offensive basis. But the big operating premise here is we're not going to do what we did in social media and say, we'll figure it out later.
All right, we are quickly running out of time. So I'm going to give it to you, Andrew, to talk China. You broke some news this morning.
Yeah, in Punchbowl News AM, we reported that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is heading to China later this week. He's bringing a bipartisan group with him. Senator Mike Crapo, who I know you've worked very closely with, is the lead Republican on that trip. What do you make of the Majority Leader of the United States Senate going to China? And what can we reasonably expect the expectations to be coming out of this trip? And something else we reported is that they are trying to get a meeting with President Xi in China.
I know about this, and Chuck and Mike have both been, you know, China hawks. And I think it's really important, and I should have stated this earlier, when I talk about China, I think it's important to make as a policymaker, if this is what you believe, that you make clear that your beef is with the CCP and President Xi's authoritarian leadership and not the Chinese people. Because too often, if you don't make that, the CCP, the Communist Party of China, will put out on WeChat, where the whole Chinese diaspora always reads, they see this is just a anti-Chinese racist approach. I think this follows. I mean, I am not for decoupling, but I do think we have to have a realistic eye towards China. I commend the Majority Leader and Mike Crapo for putting this delegation forward. I think we have to be tough-eyed about saying, you know, China's a great nation, second largest economy in the world. We want to work with you, but you can't keep stealing $600 billion of intellectual property each year. You've got an authoritarian and surveillance regime that would make Orwell blush, what you've done to the treatment of the Uyghur people or the people of Hong Kong. And I think we need to be realistic that, you know, go back to Russia. Russia was a ideological and military threat. It was never an economic threat. China is investing in domain after domain in technology at a rate that we did in the 60s. And I was a wireless guy. The wake-up call for me was 5G, where they had at one point the winning player, but they were also setting the standards. So I think, you know, we've pushed back there. We put a CHIPS bill through. I think we need to be clear with China that we intend to compete with them on SMRs, on synthetic biology, on quantum computing, on AI, in all of these domains. There's a way we could work together, but we are not going to take our eye off the ball about how China is with a focus that at some point may end up undermining them. All their investment in AI, they still haven't released a large language model because they don't trust their people to actually be able to ask a question about something like Tiananmen Square. I still take our hand over China, and particularly at this moment in time, you've got a lot of countries that went in Belt and Road that are frankly dissatisfied customers. So I applaud what the senators are doing, but I also think it's a great time for us to reopen conversations with countries in Africa, where the future of the world is going to be determined, South America, the balance of Asia. So I hope that will be part of the agenda of that delegation and all of us as well.
All right, we got through many topics, not all of our questions, but we are out of time. Thank you, Senator Warner. We really appreciate it this morning. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, and a big thank you to Andrew for joining me this morning. Now I'd like to welcome Henry Brooks. He is President of Power and Controls at Collins Aerospace and RTX Business for a fireside chat. Henry. Thank you, thank you. Good morning. Well, thank you so much for being here this morning, flying up. You also have some personal excitement happening with family, a newborn coming. So Punchbowl News, though, we made it this week.
We did. We did.
All right, Henry, I wanted to just start, let's kind of lay the groundwork here a little bit. Tell us, for those who are in the audience and don't know, what exactly is Collins Aerospace? What do you build? What do people have they heard of that they should know about?
Well, first, thank you for having me here today. It really is a great opportunity, and I'd also like to thank Senator Warner for coming in today as well. It's the work that he's doing that enables our industry, and so we really appreciate that. Collins Aerospace is a company that is part of RTX business, and that business consists of Collins Aerospace, Pratt Whitney, as well as Raytheon, the company. And together, there are about 182,000 employees in that business, and so it's a great business with great reach. If you go back to Collins Aerospace, it's about 80,000 employees, and we're spread pretty much all over the world. We have a number of products that go on about every airplane that you can think about, whether it's commercial or whether it's military. One example, for instance, is we're working with the DOD now for JADC2. And the effort that we're doing, RTX for RTX, Collins Aerospace actually leads it. And so whether it's defense or whether it's commercial, Collins Aerospace is right in the middle of the fray. So we're proud to be in our position.
Talk about a big announcement this morning that was made around NASA's X-66 Sustainable Flight Demonstrator. This is a program that's supported by Boeing, Pratt & Whitney, and Collins. Can you talk about the announcement and the implications it's going to have when it comes to enabling fuel efficiencies?
This whole thing is about sustainability. When you think about it, today the aerospace industry creates about 2% of the world's greenhouse gases. That's a lot, number one, when you think about it. But if we did nothing within the next 18 to 20 years, we would be upwards of 20% of the world's greenhouse gases in the aerospace industry. Why is that? It's because every other industry is working to get more sustainable as well. Now, our business has the unique ability to create products and services that will enable sustainability and more of it. And we're happy to be on that journey today. The X-66 is one of those programs that's going to be a great demonstrator, and NASA's behind it. And I'd also like to thank Senator Warner for his work as well on that committee to work that out so that we get funding for it. And the idea there is that we'll fly it, and it involves Collins, it involves Pratt Whitney, and it involves the whole business, RTX. And so we're proud of that. But we'll fly it and we'll demonstrate a thinner wing. It's a truss brace type wing, and so it's a little bit different composition, if you will. But because of that, we think we can get better efficiency for the airframe itself, and we can also get better efficiency for an engine. And the engines that are going to be on it, I think that was announced, was Pratt Whitney engines.
So talk about reducing emissions. I mean, we heard the senator speak a little bit about kind of sustainability as a through line through many different industries, particularly when it comes to the DOD. But can you talk about reducing emissions for next generation single aisle aircrafts?
I sure can. So
I'm ready for you here, Henry.
That's kind of a
you and me,
softball,
we're on this journey together.
I like it. I like it. So when I think about the next generation single aisle, number one, the industry has moved forward a lot over the last number of years. Let's think about it this way. The 787 went to a more electric architecture. where a lot of the systems that were hydraulic are now electric, if you will. That was one thing. It helped with fuel burn. It helped with a lot of things. Now going forward, where we're at is saying, what if we were to actually be able to remove one of those thermal burning engines or something and create a hybrid version of it? Think about it like the cars that we have out there now that are hybrid cars, where they take some of the use away from the engine itself and you create a hybrid solution for it. We're working now really diligently to do the same thing for airplanes. We've got demonstrators that are flying. One's going to fly next year in Canada. It's called the de Havilland-8, and it's part of the C-Safe program, where essentially what we're doing is removing one of the engines and replacing it with a 1 megawatt motor. And that being the case, you'll actually fly a hybrid electric plane. We're excited about it because it can very quickly reduce the amount of fuel burn in an airplane. Now, being realistic, I wish I could buy a ticket for these to fly tomorrow, but you're not going to see a plane leaving the earth with only electric motors in the next while here. It's going to take a while to generate it, develop it, and actually test it. And let's be honest, the regulations for doing this part of the certification, they haven't been written yet, so it's going to take some time. But I'm excited about where the industry is going, and what that will do is actually create a more sustainable future for aerospace, which is really important. You'll also see that in the defense part of the market as well. The things that we do and invest in for the commercial market, they have actually taken a turn, and you'll see those same basic technologies in the defense market as well. So think about the B-52, which we're on. Think about several of the products, the E-7 that we're on as well. Those commercial technologies that we developed are also finding their way into these defense products and platforms as well. What will it do for us? It actually gives the defense marketplace at a better cost, if we do it commercial, from a commercial perspective, at a better cost, and it gives them leading edge technology that you'd have to develop otherwise on the taxpayer's dollar. And so we're really proud of the work that goes on there. There's a lot to sustainability. We could talk on that for a long time.
It was interesting in the sense that we were talking to the senator about the commercial innovation and how you can kind of foster that, and then how do you kind of work with DOD, and that sounds a lot about what you're talking about there.
Yeah, it really is.
Let's talk about a new lab called The Grid in Rockford, Illinois. You're here now, but you're going to be going to Illinois after this because it's just been unveiled. What is the goal, and what are you excited about there?
The Grid is one of the most exciting things that we've done. One of our businesses is electric power generation. We've done it for about 75 years. And so we're on a lot. We have an enviable position on most of the commercial as well as defense platforms out there. But what the Grid does is takes this and moves it to the next level. It's an integrated lab that actually gives us the ability to test 1 megawatt motors and down, if you will. And it also has the ability to scale up to test larger motors. I was talking about how over a period of time, you'll be able to remove thermal burning engines, or at least remove some of the load off those thermal burning engines, and create hybrid solutions for it with these motors. This lab is at the heart of actually enabling that to happen. So what you'll see is the lab will be able to test end-to-end systems, if you will, so that we can see how they interact with thermal burning engines and so forth. And we're going to do the grand opening for that lab tomorrow out in Rockford, Illinois. So when I finish this, I'm going there, and we're in an enviable position because we have good government officials there as well, and we're going to do a legitimate opening with it. And so I'm really proud of the work that that team continues to do, but it's all about sustainability. This is getting us just one more building block to get us out there where sustainability is the key to the future of aerospace industry. It's got to be.
So we're quickly running out of time, but I want to talk about that. A lot of these things are pretty forward-looking. I mean, how far are you projecting when you're kind of starting to think about what's happening at the grid, or you're starting to think about the electrification of some of these engines? Is this I assume like 20, 30, what's the horizon there?
The industry has said that it's going to be carbon neutral by 2050. That's the goal. Carbon neutral by 2050. And when you think about that, there are a lot of building blocks that actually have to make that go on. So what we need to make that work is we're going to need continued funding from Congress, continued funding from the government, and partnerships as well, like the NASA one that we have right now that we're working through to make it all work together. But it's going to take a while. We're deciding on what technologies are going to win, if you will, now. There will be winners and there will be losers. We're trying to make sure that as RTX, we're on the right side of that equation, and I think we will be as far as that goes. But it's going to be a 20 to 30 year journey. The next single aisle, clean sheet single aisle, right now, according to the airframers, you're talking about the late 30s.
All All right. Well, something we can all look forward to.
Yeah.
Last question here. We often leave these fireside chats. You live in Charlotte, but we had Warner, we have staffers, we have a lot of folks watching this who are regulating, who are thinking about rules, thinking about how to work with the commercial industry. What's one thing that you hope that they are thinking about when they kind of take into effect the industry that you're working for?
Only 2% of the world's population has flown, or 20%, excuse me, not 2%. 20% of the world's population has flown. So when I think about this industry and think about the number of people that are on this earth, this industry has to become more sustainable so that as it grows, it also takes care of the planet that we live on. That's important for us. That being the case is going to take continued technology development. It's going to take continued government interaction as well to make sure that we've got the right programs, make sure that we're spending money in the right places, and that we have the right private-public partnerships. So that as we go through this process, we write the regulations properly and so forth. So the way I think about it is, this is all about sustainability. Getting from where we are today to where we need to be tomorrow and creating those technologies that will enable our industry to continue to flourish as the industry continues to grow. Think about it. 20% of the almost 8 billion people on Earth have flown, and think about that pent-up demand, if you will, and then think about if we did it on the basis of today, it would not be good for our industry because of the greenhouse gases that we would emit. And so therefore, this is urgent that we take care of and that we get it right.
All right. Henry, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it. I want to thank all of you in person and on the live stream for joining us, as well as Senator Warner and his team for making this conversation possible, as well as RTX for partnering with us on this conversation. We have several others this month. You can check out our events hub at punchbowl.news. Have a great day and stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.